Do you ever feel like there's something inside you that never shuts up? That even in silence, it doesn't leave you in peace? You hear voices that don't speak with words but with memories, reactions, resentments. There are moments when your eyes say more than you'd like, and it's exhausting. You wake up tired before the day even begins. There's an invisible weight that drags along with you, and it doesn't diminish with any amount of rest, because the tiredness isn't physical. It's a weariness of being, of fighting against what you see in yourself and what you try to hide even from God. You try to appear strong, but something inside you trembles when no one is watching, and it's not that you don't have faith. You believe. You pray, you read. But even so, there's a distance between what you know and what you feel. You know God's promises, but you can't touch them. It's like standing in front of a glass window. You see freedom, you see peace, you see the life the Spirit promises, but you can't break through the glass. And you've tried everything, but the flesh is subtle. It hides even in your best moments. And that's what Watchman Nee taught with such weight, not with pretty words, but with truths that hurt before they heal. The flesh isn't just a weakness. It's a system, an internal, complete system, trained for years, that moves against everything that is of God. And it looks like you. Because it is you, the you that was formed outside of Christ, the you that learned to survive with reactions, with pride, with control, the you that defends itself with silence and tries to protect itself from pain with indifference, and it disguises itself well. Sometimes it looks like maturity, sometimes it looks like strength, sometimes it even looks like piety, but it's just flesh. And Watchman Nee said with a conviction that leaves no room for negotiation, it cannot be fixed, it must die. It's not possible to live in the Spirit and keep the flesh alive. It doesn't matter how much effort you make, it doesn't reform. And that's why you feel this constant frustration, because you try to change the behavior, but you don't surrender the source. You try to silence the symptoms, but you don't renounce control. And the flesh is skilled at this. It makes you believe you're being transformed, when in reality, it's just adapting to appear more spiritual. You start measuring change by visible actions, but inside you still want to be recognized, valued, protected. You still want to preserve that part that no one touches, that part you call your way, your personality, your story. But it's just flesh. The Spirit doesn't fight against you. He fights for you. But for that, He needs you to give up defending yourself, to stop trying to balance the cross with the image you've built of yourself, to stop hiding the wound with religious actions. Because the cross isn't a patch, it's a sentence. And the problem is that you've learned to negotiate with it, to approach it to a certain point, to carry it as far as it's comfortable. But Jesus didn't ask you to improve your version of yourself. He called you to die with Him. Galatians 2:20 isn't a decorative verse, it's a brutal truth. I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The issue is that you still want to live. You still want to preserve something. You still want to have control over how your redemption will be. You want healing, but you don't want the exposure. You want freedom, but you still want to decide who will deserve your forgiveness. You want peace, but you want to maintain it under your own standard. You want to be filled with the Spirit, but only to the point where He doesn't mess with your untouchable areas. And that's where the flesh strengthens. When you try to limit God to your terms, when you want a new life without going through the cross. But without the cross, there is no resurrection. And Watchman Nee repeated this with pain in his soul. The flesh must die, not just once, every day. Not on the altar of emotion, but in the routine of surrender. You might even say you've surrendered, that you've given everything. But observe your reaction when someone contradicts you, when you don't receive recognition, when you're forgotten, when you have to deal with rejection, when you can't control the narrative. The flesh screams. It doesn't accept being ignored. It wants to defend its place. And you realize it's still alive. It's still in command. It's still directing your emotions, your unspoken words, your strategic silences. And the Spirit? He grieves because he wants to govern, but he doesn't force entry. He waits for your surrender. He waits for you to say, truly, I give up on myself. And you'll never say that lightly. It will hurt. It will seem unfair. It will seem like you're losing, because you are. You're losing the flesh. You're losing the right to justify yourself. You're losing the power to manipulate. You're losing the pride that disguises itself as dignity. And that's the cross. That's the beginning of true life. You can live filled with the Spirit. You can, yes, but you can't take the flesh along. The Spirit doesn't cohabit with it. You have to decide, not with words, but with daily, small, hidden decisions. You die when you choose to be silent instead of proving you're right, when you forgive without being sought, when you serve without being recognized, when you renounce without advertising it, when you obey even without understanding, when you love without return, when you trust even in the dark. That's walking in the Spirit. That's the death of the flesh. And then comes the resurrection. But it doesn't happen in a spectacular way. It happens in everyday life, in the lightness you start to feel, in the peace that no longer depends on circumstances, in the freedom of not needing to prove anything to anyone, in the faith that begins to grow in silence, in the courage to be vulnerable, in the trust you discover in God, not because everything is okay, but because, even in the midst of pain, you know He is with you. He is enough. You weren't called to live divided. You weren't called to fight with human forces against spiritual structures. You were called to die with Christ and live in Him, but for that, the flesh needs to be exposed, crucified, not on the stage, but in the intimate place, where no one sees, where only God has access. And this isn't a single act, it's a lifestyle. Watchman Nee said, we should not wait for the natural death of the flesh, it must be executed. You can't spare what God wants to crucify. You can't protect what the Spirit wants to unmask. You might even seem good to others, but God sees what no one sees. He sees your hidden fears, your repressed desires, your spiritual vanities, and He wants to heal. But healing only comes when the truth is accepted, when the light enters without resistance, when you stop protecting yourself from the cross. This is the truth you need to face. The flesh is cunning. It's affectionate with you. It dresses itself with your memories, with your pains, but it doesn't want your freedom. It wants to keep you captive to itself, and the Spirit wants to break that prison. But He can only do that when you surrender, completely, without reservations, without forbidden areas, without justifications, when you say, take everything, even what I like, even what makes me feel safe, even what gives me identity outside of you. And when that happens, you begin to live, not with noise, but with depth, not with human certainties, but with genuine faith, not with control, but with rest. And little by little you realize that you're no longer the same, that you no longer react as before, that your gaze has changed, that the unspoken words are now silent prayers, that silence is no longer escape, but worship, that pain no longer dominates you, that the past no longer dictates your identity, that fear no longer shouts louder than the voice of God. Do you want to overcome the flesh? Don't try to be stronger. Be more surrendered, be more sincere, be more exposed before God, and accept dying. The flesh dies on the altar of the Spirit, and the Spirit governs where the flesh no longer reigns. Watchman Nee never spoke of a comfortable Christian life. He spoke of a crucified life, because only that life is truly free. Do you want freedom? Then die, because only those who die with Christ can rise with Him. Write in the comments, I believe in God. If you believe, He can perform miracles in your life. Do you notice how the flesh still tries to justify itself? How it even tries to use the Bible to maintain control? How it says, but I'm right, and you know you are. You know the injustice was real. You know you were left aside, ignored, misinterpreted. But the question the Spirit asks isn't whether you're right. The question is whether you want to be free. Because being right and being free often don't go together. You can win the argument but remain imprisoned. You can silence the person but continue being a slave to resentment. The flesh wants justice for itself. The Spirit wants God's justice. And that's where everything in you contorts. Because something inside you doesn't accept losing, doesn't accept God's silence, doesn't understand why He doesn't defend you before others, why He allows you to remain silent while the other party wins the argument. But that pain you feel, that tension of wanting to respond, that impulse to justify yourself, that's the flesh struggling. And you need to choose whether you will obey or feed it. What you feed lives. What you crucify dies. And this isn't symbolic, it's daily, it's real. Do you feel that pain, that discomfort in your chest when you swallow something you wanted to shout? That's the cross, that's the flesh being pushed to death. But on the other side of that pain, there's life. Life you haven't yet experienced, because only those who accept the death of the flesh can know the fullness of the Spirit. And that life in the Spirit isn't euphoria. It's not a constant ecstasy. It's an inner stability that doesn't depend on circumstances. It's a rest where before there was only tension. It's a clarity where before there was confusion. Have you ever noticed how your mind sabotages you? How you relive dialogues in your head? How you repeat what you should have said, what you wanted the other person to have understood? That's the flesh. The flesh doesn't accept being misunderstood. It wants to be clear. It wants to have the last word. It wants to fix everything. But the Spirit invites you to rest. And rest sometimes is letting the other person's confusion exist without you needing to fix it. It's trusting that God knows, that God saw, that God will act, even if you don't have the chance to explain yourself. But the flesh is subtle. Sometimes it dresses itself in zeal. You say you're defending the truth, but inside, you're defending yourself. You say you're correcting out of love, but deep down you're seeking justice for your wound. And that's why surrender is so difficult. Because the flesh disguises itself well. It seems noble, it seems sensible, it seems spiritual, but it's control. Control is the language of the flesh. Trust is the language of the Spirit. And Watchman Nee knew this. He said that the biggest problem of the Christian isn't scandalous sin. It's spiritual pride. It's the appearance of maturity. It's the unbroken heart that knows a lot of the Bible but doesn't know the cross. That has an opinion about everything but doesn't have tears before God. That preaches about forgiveness but can't release the one who wounded their soul. That's flesh dressed in religion. And it needs to die. Have you ever cried before God asking for help to forgive? Have you ever confessed that even knowing what's right, you can't do it? Have you ever surrendered saying, I know I should love, but I don't want to? That's surrender. The Spirit acts when you stop trying to be perfect and start being true. He doesn't expect a performance from you. He expects sincerity, and when He finds sincerity, He begins to operate. But it's a painful process, because God doesn't reform your old structure. He builds something new, and for that, He needs to demolish. And you feel how that hurts, because sometimes what He's destroying was what sustained you for years. A pattern of thinking, a way of protecting yourself, an emotional response. God starts touching places you didn't even know still hurt. He allows situations that expose you, not to shame you, but to show what still needs to die. Have you ever gone through that? Suddenly, something happens, and you feel like you're going back to square one. As if all the spiritual progress disappeared in seconds. The anger, the fear, the insecurity, everything comes to the surface. Not as something new, but as something that has always been there, hidden, waiting for an opening. And you realize the flesh still lives. And that's why the cross needs to be daily. The Spirit isn't disappointed with you. He's just showing you where you're still trying to survive with your own strength. And you don't need to pretend. You don't need to be strong before God. He doesn't expect a perfect response from you. He just wants you to stop fighting alone. That you say, I don't know how to change this. I can't forgive. I still want control. I still need to die. And in that moment, grace enters, not as a comfort, but as power. The Spirit doesn't comfort you so that you remain the same. He strengthens you so that you die. Yes, die. Because dying is the path to freedom. It's the only door to rest. You try to control everything because you're afraid. Afraid of being hurt again, afraid of being forgotten, afraid of not being valuable if you're not useful. But the Spirit wants to free you from that. He wants you to live as someone who has already died, someone who no longer has a reputation to defend, someone who doesn't need to prove themselves, someone who is already crucified with Christ and therefore no longer lives for themselves. That's being governed by the Spirit. It's not about mystical experiences. It's about a new government. It's about allowing another will, greater than yours, to dictate the rhythm, the choices, the reactions. It's saying yes when everything in you wants to say no. It's trusting when everything screams for control. It's loving when you feel contempt. It's being silent when you want to speak. It's speaking when you want to run. That's life in the Spirit. That's maturity. But it's lonely sometimes, isn't it? Because not everyone understands this process. People look and think you're weak, that you're being foolish, that you're letting others hurt you. But you know what you're doing. You're obeying. You're crucifying the flesh. And that can't be explained. It can only be lived. And the Spirit testifies within you that it's worth it. Even with tears, even with pain, even being misunderstood. And then, little by little, heaven opens within you, not with thunder, but with peace. Not with signs, but with rest. You begin to realize that you no longer need so many answers, that you no longer react as before, that resentment no longer finds a place, that anxiety no longer shouts as it used to, that fear has been replaced by trust. And then you understand what died was the flesh. What lives now is Christ in you. Do you feel that? That inexplicable relief. That freedom that doesn't depend on anyone? That's resurrection. Not just a future promise, but a present reality. The Spirit begins to live in you with freedom. It no longer needs to fight against you. It no longer needs to convince you to obey. Because you've already surrendered, you've already decided to die, and that's where heaven finds space on earth, in you. You start to carry a different fragrance. People can't quite put their finger on what it is, but they notice it. They notice that there's something in you that doesn't get shaken, that doesn't retaliate, that doesn't need to prove anything, that loves with lightness, that serves with joy, that forgives with sincerity, that doesn't boast about its spirituality, but lives in humility. That's the Spirit, that's the life that overcomes the world, and that's only possible when the flesh dies. Watchman Nee said that the cross isn't a doctrine, it's an experience. And maybe what you're lacking isn't more study, more fasting, more reading. Maybe what you're lacking is dying, silencing the ego, stopping the justification, stopping the comparison, stopping chasing after acceptance. Maybe what you're lacking is stopping and letting God be everything in you. Only then can the Spirit reign. Only then does true transformation happen. Are you ready for that? To stop negotiating, to let go of being right, to relinquish control, to let the cross do what needs to be done, because the Spirit doesn't invite you to an easy life. He invites you to a new life. But the new is only born when the old dies, and the old is in you. It's in your reactions, your impulses, your fears, and only you can decide, are you going to keep feeding it, or are you going to put it on the cross? You can keep trying to balance the two. You can try to be spiritual without dying, but you'll get tired, you'll get frustrated, you'll live with appearance, but without essence. And there will come a point where you realize there's no life outside the cross. And then, who knows, you might finally say, all right, let it die, let it end, let what doesn't come from you be destroyed. I surrender. I don't want to live for myself anymore. And at that moment, the Spirit will take the place that is His. He will guide your steps. He will inhabit your silences. He will fill what the flesh could never satisfy, and you will realize that you are finally living, not because you conquered, but because you died. And in dying, you allowed Christ to live in you. Write in the comments, God is my guide. If you trust that He directs all your steps, and when you truly die, something changes in the way you see everything. The world remains the same. People continue with their flaws, their demands, their cutting remarks, and their hurtful looks. But you no longer react as before. It's not because you're now faking patience or holding back to appear mature. It's because something in you is no longer there to be offended. That which was easily hurt before, that resented, that withdrew in the face of contempt or absence, no longer demands to be protected. You no longer need to defend yourself from everything because you understand that you are already hidden with Christ in God. The old you has died, but this death doesn't come with glory. It comes with humiliation, with silent nights when no one knows your struggle, with contained tears while you continue serving, listening, obeying. It comes with silences filled with surrender, where you let go of responding, of taking revenge, of distancing yourself. And on this narrow path, you realize how the Spirit is occupying the spaces that the flesh once dominated. He doesn't invade. He takes place as you empty yourself. The measure of the Spirit's rule in you is proportional to how much you are willing to let go of your own strength. Have you ever felt how the flesh tries to rise again, even after it has been crucified? All it takes is a sideways glance, a word not received, an affection denied. All it takes is someone not recognizing your effort or not giving you the place you think you deserve. And there, right there, where everything seemed to be resolved, something resurfaces. The old pride, the neediness, the desire to have a guaranteed place in someone's eyes. And you realize the cross needs to continue. It's not just once. It's not just in church or in a moment of repentance. It's day after day. It's where no one sees. It's where everything in you screams for justice, and God calls you to the altar. The flesh doesn't die without thrashing. It will try to make you give up on the process. It will tell you that you are being wronged, that you are denying yourself too much, that you are going too far in your surrender. It will remind you of the times when you have already yielded, already forgiven, already kept silent. It will try to convince you to regain control, to take care of yourself, to protect yourself from suffering. But the Spirit will whisper something that the flesh will never understand. Let it die a little more, and you, tired with tearful eyes, will feel that you have no strength. And that's where real life begins, because the flesh needs to be taken to the point of exhaustion so that the Spirit has the freedom to act. Watchman Nee said that spiritual life is not what you do for God, but how much you allow God to live through you. And that's not visible to others. It happens in the invisible, in the intimate. True transformation doesn't begin in action, but in motivation. And the flesh is an expert in acting with the appearance of spirituality. It serves, preaches, sings, cares, prays. But behind it, there is a desire for approval, a fear of being forgotten, a need to control the reactions of others. And the Spirit, he observes, and waits for the moment when you get tired of this search for recognition and say, I don't want to appear anymore. I just want to obey. Obedience is the way. Obeying when it's unfair, when it's uncomfortable, when you don't understand, when everything in you would like to act differently. Obeying without expecting reward. Obeying without expecting immediate relief. Because sometimes the Spirit tells you to be silent and you wanted to shout. Tells you to hug and you wanted to walk away. Tells you to forgive and you wanted to cut ties. Tells you to wait and you wanted to run. And in those moments the flesh rebels. But the Spirit wins when you say yes, even so, yes. Have you ever noticed how the Spirit acts in the simplest moments? how he works in the way you listen to someone, in the way you respond, in the way you pray not only with words, but with intention. He is there when you decide not to retaliate, when you see someone being exalted and your heart doesn't feel envy, when you see someone stumbling and you don't feel superior, when you choose to serve even without being seen. That's dying. That's living in the Spirit. That's victory over the flesh. But you need to be attentive. The flesh doesn't give up easily. It waits for opportunities. It observes your weaknesses. It will try to make you think that you are being foolish, weak, passive. It will use your memories, your traumas, your wounds. It will remind you of the days when you were used and then discarded, of the moments when you were faithful and were not valued, and it will try to rekindle that fire of self-righteousness. But the Spirit will whisper, "Don't worry about protecting yourself. I am your righteousness." And that's the greatest liberation, not needing to protect yourself anymore, not because you have become indifferent, but because now you trust. Trust that God cares, that He knows what He is doing, that He knows the way, that He saw every tear that no one saw, that He knows what you carry inside, and that He is building in you something that doesn't depend on praise, on visibility, on reciprocity. He is forming Christ in you. And Christ was rejected, was silenced, was misunderstood, and yet He gave Himself up. And you now follow that path, the path of the cross, the narrow path, the path that few want to tread because it demands death, not literal death, but inner death. And therefore so few experience true freedom, because they still want to keep parts alive, they still want to balance flesh and spirit. But that's not possible. One needs to yield, one needs to die, and the choice is yours. It will always be yours. Do you feel that you are at your limit, that you can't take repeating this cycle anymore? That the same pain returns, that the same struggles return, that the same feelings visit you? Maybe it's because you haven't fully surrendered yet. Maybe you've put some things on the altar, but hid others under the rug. Maybe you say you've surrendered, but you still demand answers. You still want control. You're still negotiating with God. But the Spirit doesn't work with negotiations. He works with surrender. It's not giving a little to receive a little. It's surrendering completely. It's saying, do as you wish, take as long as you wish, even if I don't understand. And that hurts. That breaks the heart. But that broken heart is the soil where the Spirit plants true life, because where there is no more strength of your own, there is room for the strength of God. And when you start to live like that, you realize that the circumstances haven't changed much, but you have changed. And that's everything. Your struggle isn't against people. It never was. It's against what in you still wants to preserve a place of control, of self-protection, of pride. The flesh doesn't want to be diminished. It wants to be noticed, it wants to be exalted, it wants to be justified. But the Spirit wants you to disappear so that Christ appears. And you will realize that when that happens, peace arrives, a peace that no one understands, because it doesn't depend on situations nor on people. It is born from the death of the flesh. And make no mistake, this peace isn't passivity, it's strength in rest. It's firmness without hardness. It's authority that comes from obedience. It's maturity that doesn't need to be explained. It's wisdom that is born from silence before God. And all of this is possible, but it starts with a yes before the cross. It starts with a choice to let die what wants to live, and that's faith. Faith isn't just believing that God can do miracles. It's believing that it's worth dying with Christ to live with Him. Do you feel that within you? That tension between what you want and what God is asking? Between the will to react and the direction of the Spirit? Between the impulse of the flesh and the invitation of the cross? That tension is the battlefield, and you need to choose which side you're going to be on. The flesh will always promise quick relief. The Spirit offers a pain that heals. The flesh cries out for satisfaction, the spirit whispers transformation, and you, with tears in your eyes, will decide. You will decide to die once more, you will decide to obey, and you will discover once again that this is the path that leads to life. Life in the Spirit isn't a one-time experience. It's a daily construction, it's a constant letting go, it's a silent dying. But within this process there is something that no one can steal, the presence of God. It grows, it becomes tangible, it occupies the empty spaces that the flesh left. And when you least expect it, you are living in a way that you never thought possible. Light, firm, surrendered, full of the Spirit, full of Christ, full of life, and that no one can give you. No religious system, no spiritual performance, no personal effort. That comes from the cross. And the cross is always there, waiting for you to stop fighting and accept dying. Because only those who die with Christ live with Him. Only those who lose win. Only those who surrender conquer. Only those who give up on themselves discover what it is to truly live. Write in the comments, God is my salvation, if you recognize that only in Him is your redemption. Have you ever stopped to notice how much of your faith is still anchored in fear? Fear of making mistakes, fear of not being accepted, fear that others will discover that inside you still waver, still cry hidden, still feel envy, jealousy, desire for revenge, a stubborn pride that doesn't die with words. Fear that God will be disappointed in you. Fear of failing even while trying to get it right. You do what you believe is right, but you feel like you're being swallowed from the inside by something you can't name. But that pushes you into a tiredness that no rest solves. This is the burden of the flesh. It weighs even when it's disguised as good intentions. And you try to camouflage it, try not to think about it, try to convince yourself that everything is okay, that time will heal. But time doesn't heal what isn't surrendered. Time only pushes under what you pretend not to see. The cross, yes, heals, because it doesn't mask, it reveals, and then it kills, and then the Spirit comes. Have you ever noticed how your faith wavers when things get out of your control? It's because even saying that you trust, you still cling to guarantees. And where there is guarantee, there is no surrender. True surrender happens when everything in you trembles, but even so you say, "Do as you wish, God." And there is no phrase more profound than that, because it disarms all the strategies of the flesh. It undoes the defenses, knocks down the reserves, surrenders even what you still love in secret. You say, "Do as you wish," and a part of you feels fear, but another part feels relief, because now it no longer depends on you. Now it's God. And when it's God, there is no more need for control, for result, for understanding. There is rest. But until you get to that point, you will fight. You will try to balance what you know with what you feel. You will say that you have surrendered, but you will want it back when it hurts. You will say that you have forgiven, but you will still be hurt by what is said in the subtext. You will say that you trust, but you will lose sleep when you don't see a way out. Because the flesh knows how to imitate faith. It copies the gestures, repeats the verses, preaches about surrender. But it doesn't surrender. It demands recognition, even if subtle. It seeks glory, even if spiritual. It can't stand being ignored. And when the Spirit begins to break that structure, everything in you reacts. Because it hurts to stop being what saved you from pain in the past. It hurts to let go of the way you learned to survive. But the Spirit doesn't want you to survive. He wants you to live. And the life that He offers only begins when the flesh stops screaming, when you give up doing with your own hands what only God can form, when you stop justifying yourself from trying to stay in the place that pain molded, when you decide that you no longer want to fight to exist, but only exist in Him. And this doesn't happen all at once. The cross isn't an emotional event. It's a spiritual process. It's a journey of death. And only those who continue walking even when everything in them cries out to stop, live. You might be wondering why God still allows certain pains to repeat, why it feels like you're going back to the same place, even after so many prayers, so many steps of faith. But maybe He's allowing the cycle because there's still a part of you that wants to control how the story ends. There's still a hidden plan, an attempt to avoid total surrender. And God, in His love, repeats the process until there's nothing left for you to hold on to yourself, until you sincerely say, take it all if you have to, even what I thought I needed to live. And then the Spirit comes. Not with noise, not with a spectacle, but with peace, a peace that doesn't explain, doesn't demand, doesn't impose, a peace that simply is. And when that peace begins to form within you, it's not because things have changed on the outside, it's because something has died on the inside. Something that prevented you from resting, from truly believing, from loving, without expecting anything in return, from following without understanding, something that carried the name of justice, but was just pride, something you called zeal, but was just fear of losing, something you believed was responsibility, but was just the desire to control. All of that dies on the altar. And what is born is lighter, purer, freer. You don't need to prove anything anymore. You don't need to chase after justifications for yourself. The Spirit doesn't demand performance. He asks for surrender. And surrender is such an intimate process that no one can evaluate it from the outside. Only you and God know how much you've been dying in silence. Only you two know the nights when you chose forgiveness even without feeling it. Only you two know how many times you stopped yourself from responding, from retaliating, from distancing yourself, not because it was comfortable, but because you wanted to obey. That is the cross. That is the flesh being put to death. That is the Spirit forming Christ in you. And that's when your faith begins to become real. Not because you feel it, but because you trust, even without feeling it. Not because you understand, but because you continue even without understanding. Not because everything is as you would like it, but because you no longer need external conditions to remain. Your root is in Christ. And Christ doesn't change. He doesn't waver. He doesn't measure you by performance. He welcomes you in weakness and transforms your weakness into space for His strength. But you need to accept the process. There's no point in running. There's no point in trying to shorten the path. Every attempt to avoid the cross ends in more pain. The flesh, when it's not crucified, creates new masks. You become someone who seems strong, but lives tired, seems mature, but lives anxious, seems controlled, but lives on the verge of collapse, because the flesh demands too much. It demands a standard from you that you can't maintain. It wants applause, recognition, prominence. It feeds on appearances, and when the applause is missing, it gets sick. When the recognition doesn't come, it's ashamed. When the prominence goes to someone else, it rages, and then you realize it wasn't the Spirit, it was just the flesh. The Spirit doesn't demand, He leads, He doesn't pressure, He calls, He doesn't accuse, He convinces, and when you begin to be led by Him, everything changes inside. You begin to desire what you avoided before. You begin to say yes to situations you would have run from before. You begin to see beauty in places where you only saw discomfort before, because now it is Christ who lives, and Christ loves truly, loves with courage, loves without expecting anything in return, loves without needing to be reciprocated, loves because He is. And that love, once it begins to grow in you, changes everything. You no longer need to force maturity. It is born naturally in surrender. Your prayer changes. The way you speak changes. The way you see the faults of others changes, because now you are looking with the eyes of the Spirit, and the eyes of the Spirit don't look for faults to accuse. They look for hearts to restore. They don't measure value based on performance, but based on the cross, and that generates mercy. Because when you understand how much you have been forgiven, you can no longer demand from others what God did not demand from you. The flesh makes you look with disdain at those who err. The Spirit makes you weep for those who have fallen. The flesh wants to see immediate justice. The Spirit intercedes for mercy. The flesh demands position. The Spirit washes feet. And you realize that the true greatness of the kingdom is invisible. It's what no one sees. It's the yes said in silence. It's the forgiveness released without announcement. It's the service rendered without trophies. It's the love offered without return. That is being filled with the Spirit. That is living as Jesus lived. Are you willing to continue dying? Because yes, continue. It has no end in this life. Every time you think you've given everything, God shows you another closed room, another unresolved memory, another unnoticed pride. And the cross presents itself again, and you choose again, surrender again, die again. And the Spirit resurrects another part of you, and Christ is formed a little more in you, until one day you look back and realize that you are no longer who started the journey. You have been transformed, not by force nor by effort, but by surrender. And that's what Watchman Nee tried to say throughout his life. It's not enough to know about God. It is necessary to be transformed by Him. It's not enough to understand the gospel. It is necessary to live crucified with Christ. It's not enough to know the Bible. It is necessary that the Word be alive within you, and that it wounds you, heals you, changes you. The flesh will never accept that. It will always look for shortcuts. But the Spirit knows that only the cross is enough. So if today everything seems confusing, if you are in an internal war, if you feel you have lost direction, maybe it is the Spirit calling you to die once more. Don't run from it. Don't rationalize. Don't postpone. Go to the altar and say, "Here it is. I don't want to command anymore. I don't want to control anymore. I don't want to protect myself anymore. Take everything, even what I don't understand yet." And the Spirit, with His serene grace, will begin once more to mold you, with patience, with love, with authority. And one day you will look in the mirror and you will realize that you are no longer reacting as before. You will realize that that old pain no longer controls you. You will realize that that resentment has lost its voice. You will realize that that fear has been replaced by confidence. And all this without effort, without despair, just because you died. And Christ now lives in you. And that yes is freedom. That yes is life. That yes is what the Spirit has always wanted to do in you from the beginning, that now, finally, you have let Him do. Write in the comments, "God, transform my life." If you want Him to change all areas of your heart, share this blessed video so that it can touch and help other people like you and me. Want to delve even deeper into faith and prayer? Download our exclusive ebook on how to strengthen your spirituality today. The link is in the comments below. Don't forget to click the subscribe button if you haven't already. Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart for being part of our faith community. If you would like to support our channel a little more, consider becoming a member of our channel. I leave here 2 more videos so that you can continue your spiritual search and growth in faith. Thank you, and may God bless you all. See you later.